Hello, everyone. I'm Saleha, and this is Chai Chat Community. A disclaimer: we are having a lot of issues with the internet, with the weather outside being absolutely crazy, strong winds. So, if at any point of time you see us getting disconnected, it's because we haven't been able to. Well, our internet is just dropping off. Uh, Tonight, I have a very special guest, and we are going to be talking about racism and whether it is prevalent in Australia or is it just something that we just randomly say. As people of color, many of us have been subjected to covert racism, subtle and not really very obvious, but sometimes it's just the way that we are spoken to, excluded from conversation, or just generalization. A few months ago, Indian Care, along with the Eastern Community Legal Center, did a project called Amplifying Community Voices in the East to understand different issues about racism and getting us empowered to act as community ambassadors against racism. We were supposed to be joined by Ritu Dahia, who is not being able to connect, who was part of this project. So she's still trying, but until then, we have another awesome guest, Dr. Ishan Arya. But before I introduce you to him, I would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which we are meeting tonight, and I pay my respects to their elders, past, present, and emerging. Ishan, thank you so much for joining, and I'm really
Pleasure.
excited to hear everything that you have to share with us today. And I can see Ritu, but her devices are not connecting, so I'm guessing we will not see her tonight. Anyway, so tell us something about yourself, Ishan, before we launch into a very, very important subject.
Well, thanks for having me first of all, and you made some very relevant points about racism, and I'm looking forward to sharing my views on the same. At the moment, I'm working as a residential life manager with Little Hall and Uni Apartments, which are a part of the University of Melbourne, and I also do sessional lecturing and tutoring for La Trobe University's MBA and University Melbourne's marketing. And yeah, so I've done a bit of work, a lot of activism, you could say, until date, both in Australia and in India, more over here, of course. So I do take a lot of passion in raising awareness on social issues. They don't always go well with people, but
Of course,
that's
never does.
that's that's the way it is, isn't it?
It
So
is.
so wherever I go, whatever work I've taken up till date, be it city councils, private bodies, my own business, I always try to bring in a social narrative as much as possible. So yeah, that's why I like your show
Thank
because
you.
you're really bringing in that narrative across to people. So looking forward to it.
Thank you, Ishan. So we are in the 21st century and we are still talking racism. Why are
Mm.
we still talking about racism?
Well, why are we? We are talking about it because we need to. It's around us. It's not gone. And because racism exists, there are a lot of people affected by it. Um, it could be due to discrimination. It could be because of denied opportunities. It could be, the way they are projected or treated in societal settings that could be detrimental for their mental health. And owing to all these, it is an area that we need to talk about. And I'm sure we all know there are people talking about it, trying to create awareness, and that's why we are. And I feel, again, the reason why, I get the underlying question, why are we talking, as in why do we still have racism, isn't it?
Yes,
It's just a feeling I have that people still believe in being superior. People still have this feeling of somebody being inferior to them being superior for a variety of reasons, and those varieties keep evolving with time. Interestingly, it could be caste based racism. It doesn't always have to be one country and another country. It can be
And we know
internal,
about
ethnic
caste-based
as
racism.
well.
Yes.
Absolutely, don't we? So a lot of that, and then it goes on. It goes to skin color, eye color, and whatnot. But it's all. I feel it's all. It all boils down to one person or a cohort who feels they are better, they are superior because they are born in a particular way. So here we are not talking about what you have done with your life or your achievements. It's more to do with being born in a certain way and hence being superior to someone who is not. And then just having that feeling that a person who is born in a certain way would have inherent capabilities that others wouldn't have. So I think that that's still it's still this thought exists in different societies, including a developed and very economically sound country like Australia as well.
Absolutely. Um, I have a lot to say about the question I'm just going to ask you now. What does racism look like to you?
Racism, what does it look like? Everyday acts. I would say it's honestly visible and invisible. I know it's ironic if I say it looks, although it's invisible, but yeah, we can feel it. We can see it in outcomes as well. Sometimes we don't see the action. Sometimes it's evident, right? We see people speak in a particular way. It could be to us, it could be to others. We could be a bystander as well. Sometimes it's the news that we hear and see acts of racism, but the
Yes, the
invisible
news that
ones
we
as
had
well.
about Adelaide, Australia Post not wanting Indians to be
Yeah, yeah,
who wasn't they
absolutely.
weren't going to photograph Indians.
Absolutely. And that's a very interesting example as well. I know there could be two arguments to it. One of the argument would be yes, it does come across as racist. The other argument would be, well, was it an honest mistake where they were just trying to fix a problem? And
Well,
that's where the issue is, that people are trying to even call it an honest mistake and trying to say, well, that may not be racism. Again, that brings me to the first question. That kind of attitude is why we still have it,
yep.
because such thoughts or such actions should not be tolerated. They should be called out. Absolutely. So there
You know,
is
the fact
no,
that they're saying that it is misrepresented, that is so not true.
no, it's
I'm
not.
sure it would have gone through many signatures and whatever else. And how can you just come up with a statement like that?
Absolutely. And it is a hurtful statement for the whole community.
Absolutely, it is. I mean, yeah, there are lots of explanations as to why. Maybe you could explain that. It's not difficult. We all understand speak English because, as I tell a lot of people, because of the kind of work that we do before, when I first moved into Australia, I mean, the first question I was asked is, how do you speak English so well? For me, that is racism because you're already typecasting me. And in your
Absolutely.
mind, because I'm a woman of color, you
Mm,
think I cannot speak English. And because I write for a living, I've had people ask me, do you actually know the language? And then pointedly looked at my skin color. So, I never tire of saying this to my colleagues also because I need them to know that, if someone talks to me like this, it is not correct. It is not accepted. And I remember I complained to the HR manager and she turned around and said, if you're not happy, you should leave. I'm sorry, that's not an answer to a
no,
question.
that's not. And it's
That is
shocking.
not a
It's
solution.
very disturbing, Saleha, to even know that someone would say, if you're not happy, that you need to leave.
Yep.
It,
She
it,
did.
it
She
is
had
it
just
is the
moved in here.
worst.
Yeah, yeah, she did. She did.
Yeah, even coming back to the Australia Post one, all they could have done is probably said, sorry, we regret to inform that at the moment we are unable to comply with the Indian
Yes,
Passport
exactly.
Services standards. That's it. Owe it that you don't have correct lighting or you're not able to comply. Do not put it on, the racial side. That's and coming back to my previous comment as well about visible and invisible. The invisible racism for me is what really hurts me to see how people are impacted by the treatment that they have received, the toll it takes on their mental health, the toll it takes on even their career choices or career paths. And not just career, it could be anything. You could also say a social path or a life choice as well, are heavily impacted sometimes by acts of racism. So the invisible ones are also the ones that we need to focus on. That's racism for me.
What are the most visible ones?
Oh, visible ones are, I mean, I'm sure everyone would know them, the typical ones we always hear, but we shouldn't downplay their impact, of course, you know. It's calling out people by their color. It's clearly, discriminating people. It could be at employment, it could be during social gatherings because of their appearance or perceived backgrounds as well. And again, generalized comments, so-called innocent comments which are not so innocent. You know what I'm saying, and like the ones you have faced. How do you speak English that well? Hello, I'm from a country that has most English-speaking population in the world.
Yes. um, I hear a lot of girls talk about. So there is a Facebook group that I follow. A lot of uh, the girls who are there are obviously migrants like us, and they constantly talk about the accent and how people,
Mm,
the managers are saying, "Okay, we don't understand your accent. Why wouldn't you teach them instead of saying stuff like this?" And you know, another thing that I don't know if recruiters are saying now, it's you're not a cultural fit. I have no idea what that means. I don't know what a
mm.
cultural fit is. So, how do you decide whether you're a cultural fit or not?
Yeah, they've just come up with a commercial word to say, yeah, we don't want people of your race.
Yep, absolutely. Okay, we're getting questions, Ishan. So, I'll ask the first one. Bear with me, please. Um, does invisible racism exist within the South Asian families?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely.
No one's
Invisible,
as racist as we are.
I would say visible and invisible both.
More
And again,
visible.
I wouldn't want to pinpoint and specifically target or drive my narrative to South Asian families because it does exist in a lot of families. We could go with a lot of ethnic families, a lot of Anglo families as well. So it does exist in all types of societies and communities. However, since the question is about South Asian families, it's for that reason that I would like to, speak about them. Yes, I think within India and within some South Asia, it's not just India. I get it. India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, and so on. Um, um, some also include Afghanistan, and we have Nepal as well. But
And
the point is, sorry,
Nepal.
Nepal, Maldives. So the point is, within these communities, yes, there is a lot of internal family-based racism, based again on skin color, again on caste as well. Who is marrying whom? Are you marrying the same community or not? And what's the and people like to dig deep. I feel people should dig deeper into fake news and research, but no, I think this is the area where they like to dig as deep as possible. Where is the father coming from, and the grandparents coming from, and the history coming from? And they like to have a narrative and say, well, someone is slightly impure because somebody down 5 or 6 generations married somebody else. So this is seen. And I would say anyone who would say it does not exist is either naive and they really need to, or they're in a denial state. But this is around, whether very open or not. Deep inside, people do compare a lot of factors when it comes to even eye color. Even
Fair
within
and
South
lovely,
Asian.
Ishan. How can you
Oh,
forget
oh
fair and
gosh.
lovely?
Oh gosh, yes, absolutely. And they tried to, I mean, that becomes a different topic. They tried to fix it, not entirely, but the one for the men, they tried to go for fair and handsome, I think.
Handsome, yep.
And they tried to change the advertisements to say it's all about beauty. I have issues there as well. It's again, I mean, that's not the topic. It's not racism, but again, it's objectifying. Again, we are trying to say beautiful is better than the other one. So try to be beautiful. Otherwise, you're not going anywhere. They're just changing the color to beauty. So yes, for those listeners who have no idea what we are talking about, Fair and Lovely is a fairness cream based in South Asia, which has heavy amounts of bleach to lighten the skin. Something similar, you could say, is in the Western societies as well, where we look at bronzing, tanning lotions, and tanning salons.
It's the other way around, isn't it?
Other way around. That brings me, and Salah, you've touched a very good point. I just came to my mind about these creams, and the whole application part. I'm sure all of us are aware of the concept or the very unfortunate dark history of the black face.
Yep.
So that is when white actors, usually in television or media, would portray ethnic people by darkening their skin. I see that in South Asia all the time. How many times do we see movies where a light-skinned actor has been
Absolutely.
has been soaked literally in dark makeup just so they appear in a particular way? And there are many problems here. Someone might argue with me and say, well, that's because they want the character to look in a particular way. Well, let's look at racism right here. Why can't you hire an actor of that natural
Who is,
color?
yep,
So
who's dark
you're
skin?
denying somebody an opportunity who, who has the ability to showcase the authenticity of that role and rather going for someone who is not. And people don't get it that this is another form, an evolved contemporary form of blackface.
While you're talking, I was thinking of so my guilty pleasure is watching Pakistani serials, and I was watching this with a few of my Pakistani friends. They told me to watch this serial called Parizad, and yeah, they had blackened the guy's face because they wanted to show him as like because he's dark. I
Mm,
mean, why? Why can't you naturally have
mm,
somebody
mm,
who has got darker skin?
mm.
Yep. Um, I'm going to
People
there's
try to associate that with tragedy. People try to associate that with sorrow, failure. And
yes.
that's very,
And
very deep
less
rooted.
of what, yes, absolutely. And I think less of a human being. That's what they were trying
Yeah,
to portray. It was
yep,
a
yep.
fantastic, it
Mm,
was a fantastic drama series. But I constantly kept seeing this man as just, light-colored guy who has just put so much makeup to make himself black. Anyway,
mm.
this is Shreyoshi. Shreyoshi, thank you for watching. She's watching from Delhi. Um, yes, racism is deep-rooted mindset, and it is very tough to weed it out. And no one knows it better than Ishan and me. I think coming from India, where it is so prevalent, cannot say only we are, people in Australia are racist. Back home, we are racist. We just talked about it, and also here, Chris has another question for you. Does faith, religious belief play a role towards racist approaches mindset? You go first, Ishan, and then I will have my say.
I think it does. I would have liked to see the question again, though.
Ah, yeah, yeah, yeah.
Does faith, religious belief play any role towards racist? Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. It does a lot. I mean, I'll be very open in giving an example that I've noticed. Well, my one, I'll give multiple, but I've seen a lot of religious institutions or places of worship of not one, not two, not three, not four, of more than five religions. So people who want to tag and immediately guess, or is he talking about this religion? It's more than five or six that I've experienced. So probably the religion you're thinking is a part of that. I've seen prayer times or entries being denied based on someone's color, just because they feel, according to the religious text or according to the priest who has probably modified the rules, that someone gets an entry or someone gets to sit or come close to the vicinity of the idols. So I've seen this in different faiths. I've also seen different faiths where at certain prayer times, people of certain ethnicities, coming from maybe African countries or South Asian countries, get to pray after the ones from the Middle East. So I've seen that in a lot of mosques as well. I've seen that in temples as well, and I've seen that in churches as well in different forms. So I do see. I think there is no denying where religion and racism actually interact. But Saleh, I want to. I'm also very keen to hear from you.
Well, I just told you, I come from an interfaith background. And I think one of my earliest memories, and thankfully that's the only one I have, is, I come from a small town. So I used to go to my friends' houses. And I remember one time I went to this friend's house, and as we were leaving, as my brother and I were leaving, the mother got Ganga Jal, and she started, cleaning her house with it because I'm half Muslim. So, hey, a Muslims come to a Hindu house. So that is one. And I kind of, I remember I came and I said to my nani that why do they do this? I mean, I am just like them. And she was like, don't worry, I will tell you. And she did explain to me. I remember another time we were in Puri, which is like in Orissa, which is a big seaside resort. And my mother had taken my brother and me to the temple. And because my mother's Hindu, they let her in. They asked her name and they let her in. But my father, the minute he said his name, they were like, nah, not going to let you in because you're not a Hindu, you're a Muslim, you cannot come here. Um, so, he then went around, he came, got in, and he just changed his name for that 5 minutes or 5 seconds to just get into the temple. So it happens all the time. I mean, I know an ex-colleague of mine said to me, I don't mind who my children marry as long as it's not a Muslim. So I was like, okay, she doesn't care who her children marry, except. Uh, so yeah, there are so many, and I keep telling everyone that religion doesn't really play a big role in daily life. It is not important. I do pujas, which is such a big part of my life. I do Eid, I do Gurpurab, I do Diwali, I do Christmas. Every festival is a celebration of food, of getting people together. And isn't that what all religious? I mean, isn't that what festivals are for? I am so yeah. To be honest, I've never had this at the Gurdwara ever. Nobody's asked. Nobody said, "Why are you a non-Sikh and are you coming here?" It doesn't matter. I haven't had this in any of the mosque. Instead, in Delhi, I remember my husband could go into the inner sanctum because he's a man. I couldn't, and I was like, okay, you know, things change. But yeah, I mean, it is good. I hope in our lifetime, it changes, but I don't think so. I hope in yours it does. Okay, let's move on. I'm going to ask you. So, people's relationship with racism is very, very personal. What role do you think employers, business leaders, and managers play? Let's take one at a time. So let's take work where, we all go to work and we'll do the business part of it later. So let's say your immediate manager and the organization that you work in. So what should they do?
For starters, I work in the education industry. And honestly speaking, out of all the sectors, out of all the industries, at least in Australia, the education one is leading at the moment with actual actions and frameworks against racism. So I would say the workplace where I work, we have very aware people, people of different backgrounds who are really working towards lessening or eliminating racism at workplaces. But that does not mean that it doesn't exist elsewhere. So I have heard stories, I've seen examples as well, where immediate managers many times deny the existence altogether. And with that denial, they did not just deny that it exists, they deny the impacts, and they try not to bring any frameworks where there is a budget that has to be spent. So at the end of the day, it becomes something that's not very important. It's not a priority, can be dealt with later because it's going to need a certain amount to, bring a legislation, bring a framework, and bring in
Yeah.
actions. So that becomes a secondary many times with and the whole idea is denial of sometimes they I mean like I said, with aware managers, it's they don't always deny the existence, but sometimes they could deny the impacts. And that brings us to that part, about which what aspect of the society or discrimination should get a priority. I think all should, but in a holistic approach. But that's where sometimes I do see issues from the management side.
What do you think? So employers, because there are lots of South Asian employers who employ South Asians, and there's a lot of racism there. There's a
Oh,
lot of bullying there.
oh, heaps. Actually, in my thesis, my PhD thesis, there is an entire chapter dedicated to this particular aspect. Well, in my thesis, I do focus on employers and the bullying, harassment, and racism, but it's more towards the retail and the food industry. So more to do towards Indian students or South Asian students or international students who work part time at sometimes employers of their own countries,
Yeah,
and that's where they get exploited a lot of times
absolutely,
too.
totally.
You might have an employer running a restaurant from a certain part of India who is unwilling to employ somebody from other part of India, or if they do, that person may be treated with, they could be mocked for their style, their culture, their eating habits, or whatnot. The very common one, I mean, that we see around is, and I can't believe it's still around, is tagging people based on whether they eat a roti or rice. I mean, you're
No.
trying. I've heard people say,
Wow.
"What's wrong with you? Come on, you belong to this particular community. You can't be eating rice. Come on, you know, come on, be strong. Have a roti." So it starts with food, and how I mean, I don't know what to say. How terrible could it be? We are trying to stop someone, tag someone, attack someone emotionally and mentally for the food that they eat. So I can't believe this, and it's still around. So yes, yes, see that a lot happening at within again South Asian communities. And every time I'm saying South Asian communities, at the moment my focus is on the ones in Australia. Obviously, I'm not denying that would be in the whole countries as well, but that's where I'm focusing right now. I don't know if this is relevant, but have you seen the number plates nowadays? A lot of number plates are portraying or visually trying to make a statement about the state they come from and the community they belong to. So many number plates. So, so
Really?
again, for our international listeners in Australia, you're allowed to have your car registration plate
Personalized. Yep.
customized, so you can personalize it as far as it's available. A homework for everyone right now at home: go to Vic Road's website. All of you can access it, and try to type in the following words and see if the number plate is available or not. Type the names of all the states, then put an I in front of the state. So if it's Punjab, try Punjabi, Punjab, Haryana, Haryanvi, Delhi, Delhiite, Pune, Punekar, Mumbai, Mumbaikar, and so on. And just try. All of them will be taken. Everyone's proudly saying that. Not just that, we have number plates that say Gujjar, Thakur, and whatnot. So even the
In
subcaste
Australia.
in Australia. In fact, I'm actually going to work on a paper where I've seen castes that have stickers that also say proud to be of a particular community. Proud to be this, proud to be that, proud to
Wow,
be
I've actually
Pathan.
never seen this.
All right, I think a good homework would be go for cultural events, and when we visit places of worship or cultural events, instead of going to the event, just walk around the car
Go
park.
to the car
It's
park.
it's full of surprises.
Chris says, agree with the number plates. I've seen so many Gujjar plates. Okay, this is very interesting. This is something I would like to know.
I know LGBTIQ community. Oh, sorry. So the question is, does LGBTIQ community
They
face
face more racism than others.
more racism? I would say it's hard for me to comment on this part. I'm aware of the perils and of the discrimination that the LGBTIQ community face, for sure. Again, it's but whether race plays a part, I need to study more. I would
Or is
believe
it
that
just, yeah, I think they're just persecuted because um,
for
I
being
think
so,
amongst us
yeah.
South Asian, and in saying that, not only South Asians, many people can't accept LGBTQI. I mean, there is still such a lot of stigma surrounding it. Acceptance is so difficult. And,
The stigma
yeah, I
around it,
don't want
yeah.
to comment on this because I don't know much about it. I know they go through a really hard time, but
I
it's
know
something
about the
that
religious
hurts.
persecution of LGBTIQ in countries of faith and within religious communities. So I'm not denying that. That's pretty open out there. when we have the Pride Parade in Melbourne, that you should always see the faces who are against it and the comments people pass about those parades. So there are religions, obviously, who treat that. I think most religions are against LGBTIQ, some more than the others, and then sometimes the religious tones do come from past histories and races. So maybe we can draw from that part, but I feel directly if you're talking about racism, maybe yeah, LGBTIQ communities without a doubt face more issues, discrimination, and crimes within ethnic communities compared to the more progressive ones. That's what I feel.
Thank you. How can we individually create an anti-racist community and a workplace? Because the
A
buck
lot.
stops with us. I'm sure we have consciously or unconsciously being racist to people.
Call it out first of all. If we see racism, be a very active bystander. There are a lot of bystander training materials and trainings available as well. I have gone through a lot of training in bystander action, so learn about it, get into those programs, and learn how to call it out, learn how to stand against it as well. There are a lot of, and be aware of your contracts and your organizations. A lot of organizations at the moment have, allow whistleblowing as well legally, and they're not allowed to sack you. In fact, it's their duty to protect you in case you're a whistleblower. So learn about your rights, get some legal advice as well, and if it's happening at a very alarming intensity, do speak up at a very impactful level. So I'm talking about whistleblowing and taking legal action as well. However, if you see it at minor level on a day-to-day basis, before I comment on that, let me say nothing is minor, major. Racism is racism and it is
Yes,
impactful.
exactly.
What I mean is, if it's more subtle, according to what you may perceive as being subtle, then call it out on the spot. Let it not grow and let people know that it's not going to be tolerated. Furthermore, I feel if you are in a position of power and a position of leadership, try your best to bring up these into higher level meetings, try to create a budget for it, and bring in a legislation, bring in a framework in your organization's constitution that calls out racism. For example, the places where I work, we have zero tolerance policy, and by zero tolerance, it is scary. Someone might be asked to stay at home until things have been cleared if they're accused of racism. So it's not the victim that gets blamed. The person who is accused will have to stay away from everything until they are cleared. So I feel such zero tolerance policy should also be studied by us, and we should try to bring them to our workplaces somehow.
Thank you. Uh, Shreyoshi says, let me just put it up. Racial discrimination begins within the four walls we call home, with siblings being compared on the basis of color, academic ability.
Shreyoshi, so true. So true. I mean, I haven't experienced it firsthand because I'm the only child, but I've seen cousins around, and the more we interact, we learn about people's experiences. It's so much, isn't it? Especially when you have parents of different backgrounds, of different, skin tones. Straight away there is a comparison. One looks like one parent, the other looks like the other, and that has more more what would you say, more layers of racism, or even gender-based discrimination, where people would favor one child for taking the looks after the father and not favor the other one for taking after the looks of the mother. It could begin there with, then of course, the color, skin color, one being the better, one being not so, and whatnot. So yeah, I absolutely agree. Self-serving bias, isn't it? And then at its best, unfortunate, at its worst, I should say, where one child gets favored and gets promoted more and more and more, and automatically the other gets left aside.
You brought back a memory, and I have to say I've been guilty of this. My daughter went to South Australia and Northern Territory when she was a young girl. What she was in, I think, year 8 or 9, and she was away for 10 days. Um, and when she got off the bus, I was there to pick her up from school. And the first thing I said to her is, "Oh my God, how black have you become?" I'm guilty. I've had to unlearn everything I knew, because for me, it was not, in my mind, it was not about color. It's just that, you have whatever it is, Um, and she has carried it with her all her life. And I've had to change my thinking. I've had to stop saying stuff like, oh, he's so white, she's so white, or he's so black. Whatever. I stopped doing it totally. It needs a lot of time. You need to unlearn everything that you knew growing up. So my brother, I have a younger brother, um, and he's a big part of my life. We are like 18 months apart and extremely close. So I look like my dad. I have his coloring. He was light skinned. My mother was what we call in India wheatish complexion, and she's tall. Again, unlike my dad who's short. So I have inherited all my dad's features and height and everything. My brother has inherited everything of my mom's. Like, he's tall, strapping young man. And one of my dad's uncles, he used to call my brother Kaluram. He loved him to death. He was his favorite grandchild, or, grandnephew, or whatever you call it. But Kaluram. And now I listen, but I don't think he meant it in a bad way, because that generation, I don't think they thought about it. But I remember my brother telling me once that, you remember Dadaji used to call me Kaluram. So obviously, somewhere it hurt him that you call people Kaluram because they're dark skinned.
This issue had also popped up in the Indian cricket team, where in one of the IPL matches there was a
Sammy,
player.
Sammy,
Okay, I
Sammy
don't.
was
Yeah.
Kalu. Yep, Sammy, the West
Mm.
Indian captain.
And that was the exact explanation they gave, isn't it? Or we just called it, out of love. But if it's out of love, why does it have to be color?
Yeah.
If you love the person, there are so many other aspects of the person that you can call them, lovingly. Doesn't have to be a particular trait which is associated with racism and has a deep rooted history as well.
Absolutely. Chris wants to know if there is a connection between racism and intergenerational trauma.
Could you like to elaborate on the intergenerational trauma bit?
For some people, it may be, growing up, like you said, constantly being compared to
Oh,
the
yeah,
younger
okay.
sibling or cousins or
Mhm.
whatever else. It can be.
Oh,
And
it could be, yeah. There could be a person who has been traumatized, being called after the particular skin tone that they have, and then it might be their life mission to give birth to a child who is lighter than them, and hence, finally proving their worth to the family as well. So yeah, absolutely, that's so true and unfortunate.
um, this
Uh,
is my
oh,
last question. Um, how can we increase inclusiveness?
I would say micro level both. Start with your home. Also try to do it at work. I'm sure we can do a lot within our friend circles. There's one point I like to make. Sometimes people do not openly discriminate or call or try to say something hurtful to a person who is darker. But despite that, I mean, even if they're not doing so, what they do is they go out of the way to praise someone within a social setting who is of a lighter tone. That is also pretty hurtful and discriminatory. So you don't have to point finger at someone and say, "Hey, you are dark," or yada yada, or directly have a go at them or act in a very alienating way. All you need to do, and all that a lot of people do, is praise out of the way the looks and the color of a person who is lighter, but they
Which
are
is also
causing damage.
pretty frustrating, isn't it? Yeah.
Exactly. And they're like, "Oh, I didn't say anything to you, did I?" But oh, well, you are neglecting this person and openly praising the other one for their color. So I think what could we do? This is something that we could also create awareness about. And again, I would come back to the workplace. If we are in good positions of power, we should try our best, for our organizations to also sign state-based and nationally based frameworks. One such is equal opportunity employment legislation. So be a signatory to that. So there is a check on you as well. And you're making a loud and clear statement as well. Of course, how you act on it is one part, but at least there's some big start that you're saying that we are not for discrimination. We're going to look beyond everything and just focus on the talent and nothing else. So I think that's where we could also go on. Act.
Well, hopefully we will change. I would love to see this change in my lifetime. Um, Thank you, Ishan. It was just so lovely speaking with you. And I hope we can
Pleasure.
carry on this conversation next year. And when we come back, I hope we can talk about how things have improved and,
I really hope
what
so.
each one of us has done in this space.
For sure, certainly. Uh,
Thank you very much for joining me.
Thank
Stay
you.
well. It is pouring in my part of Melbourne. I don't know what's happening in yours, but yeah, it's like crazy winds and absolutely very, very strong downpour. Take
I'm
care of
inside my
yourself.
office building, so I can't tell. But yeah, thanks for having me.
Okay, Saoshi, thank you for joining all the way from Delhi. Um, and see you soon. Okay, bye.